There are many things that I love about the season of Advent. There's, for instance, the fact that there's these hymns that we love and look forward to singing every year. These hymns that kind of contrast to the bustling, peppy songs that we're hearing in stores. These hymns are mostly minor key and slower tempo, kind of more reflective. And unlike all of the big decorations that we see out in the world, we are on the sparse side here. It won't be until Christmas Eve night that we come in to all these glorious Christmas decorations. But I think the thing that I love most about Advent is kind of its just paradoxical nature. The fact that Advent every year begins with an ending and ends with a beginning. Because every Advent 1, it's always the gospel, it's always some kind of apocalyptic vision that reminding us that one day this will all come to an end. And then the end of Advent 4, the reading is either in Matthew, the birth of Jesus, Matthew's nativity, which isn't much of a nativity, or the Annunciation, the angel Gabriel coming to Mary to say, you are going to bear a son, or the Visitation where Mary goes to her cousin Elizabeth and the babies leap in the wombs when they meet each other. So it's interesting to think about this beginning with an ending and ending with a beginning and what that means. Because in life, really, every beginning is the end of something. When I got married, I recognized that this was going to be the end of me being single, that I would never be single again. I would either be married or divorced or something else. But that would be the end of that time in my life. When I had Lewis, it was like there's this beginning, but there was the end of life of not having children, of being able to do whatever I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And even when Sam was born, I remember very vividly the night that Sam was born, because somehow I knew that it was coming that night, even though the signs hadn't started yet. But I put Lewis to bed knowing that this would be the last time I would put just one child to bed. So all of these beginnings in my life have come with endings, and that's how it works, right? Even when we have a loved one that dies, that's the beginning of a new chapter. That is us going forward. So every beginning is an ending, and every ending is a beginning. One of the podcasts that I love to listen to is Faith for Normal People. And they had Diana Butler Bass on recently to talk about her new book, which is about the church year. And they were kind of marveling at how she could make something as boring as the liturgical year really interesting. And one of the things that she was talking about was this kind of circular nature, and this, we are beginning at the end and ending at the beginning, and we are coming full circle, and that in the Christian year, the climax of the story isn't at the end, but in the middle with Easter. And that tells us something about the way that life works and the way that God works within us, is that it's not necessarily that everything's linear, that there are circular times, that the beginning and the end often meet. One of the things that I have been thinking about with the gospel story is how In early Advent, Advent 2, we have John the Baptist, as we do every year, Advent 2, John the Baptist telling us to repent. The Lord has come near, repent. And the word that we get repent from is metanoia, is the Greek word, which can also be translated as turn around. So, when we hear it from John the Baptist, we think we're doing things we shouldn't be doing, we're going to turn around and do something else. But in today's gospel, it's an interesting, it's like a new level of repent, a new level of turn around. Because Joseph wasn't necessarily doing anything bad. Joseph was a righteous man. And he realized that his betrothed had, become pregnant, and he knew it wasn't by him. And he was going to do what he thought was the right thing. He was going to dismiss her quietly. But that, going back to the beginning and bringing that to the end, Joseph turns around. Joseph hears in a dream from an angel that, you know what, maybe we need to do something different here. Maybe I don't need to dismiss Mary quietly, but maybe what I need to do is stay with her and adopt this child. And this is an ordinary thing. Joseph is an ordinary guy. And he was just asked to stay with his betrothed, finish that marriage contract, stick with her. And I imagine that Joseph didn't really fully understand. I don't know that Joseph ever really fully understood what happened, because most scholars think that Joseph probably died fairly early in Jesus' life, because other than that story in Luke where they're going to the temple and Jesus stays behind, you don't really hear a whole lot about Joseph in the Gospels. So Joseph may not have even really got to realize what he did. But because Joseph was able to hear this angel and turn around and do something that's different than what he had planned, Joseph made Jesus part of the house of David. Because if it had just been Mary, Mary wasn't part of the house of David. So Joseph kind of gave that extra bit of legitimacy to Jesus by saying yes, by doing something other than what he had planned. I suspect that this talk about endings and beginnings kind of being both the same and doing something differently than what we had planned has probably resonated with you all, because this is life. This is life where we are sure that we are going to go down one path. And then we hear a call. Might be a literal call, might be a text message. It could be a dream. I've had dreams that have made me rethink what I'm doing. It might be some random person in the grocery store that says something that gets your attention, that says, hey, maybe the thing that I had planned isn't what I need to do. Maybe I need to do something different. And, I was talking recently to Dean Matthew Woodward, who's the dean of the cathedral in Sacramento. And we are talking about how, we make these decisions as we're going through life, and, is it mapped out, or is it some other way? Is God working in the midst of us? And what he said, I believe that way leads on to way. So we go down this road, and then this road leads us to that road, and that road leads us to another road. And then we end up being maybe somewhere where we didn't expect. Or maybe we come full circle. We have that expression about things coming full circle. I feel like I've come full circle with you all. It's kind of funny because when I started here in January of 2024, we were without a janitor. And then after Thanksgiving this year, we were again without a janitor. I think we now have one, luckily, right before Christmas. It's a good time to have a janitor in a church. It was pretty rough not having one when I first started right after Christmas, and there just being kind of glitter and tinsel everywhere. But things come full circle. On December 31st of 2023, I left a job that I really loved and had very deep meaning for me, which was working as a hospice chaplain. And I was telling someone before that I talked about being a hospice chaplain so much that my seminary class had a bingo game going for when we would get together and we'd play bingo with the things that you heard all the time. And that someone suggested that I needed to add hospice chaplain as a potential bingo square because they recognized that I said it in almost every class and that they could easily, that would help them in bingo if that was a bingo square. And this morning, I was talking to someone here and they said, you know, almost every conversation I've ever had with you, you've talked about hospice. And when I went to seminary, I was definitely felt called to be part of the church. I felt a strong draw to do Eucharist and to be in community and to lead a community into a deeper relationship with Jesus. And yet, when I was in formation doing the chaplaincy training, that's kind of what led me to hospice. And then when I got done with seminary, I had this grant offered to me that was a 2-year curacy to help train me, to prepare me to be a rector. And that's what I planned to do, was to go and be a rector somewhere. That was surely what I knew that I was going to do. I had started applying for positions as a rector back January of this year. I was in 4 different processes. And in one of them, it became clear that I didn't want to move. I didn't want to move my family. My spouse had done a great deal of hard labor himself, replacing the siding and windows in our house, and to ask him to pack up and leave that house was probably too much. To ask our kids to pull themselves out of the school and the roots that they had and go find somewhere else was probably too much. And I knew that when I made that decision, that probably wouldn't be a rector of a church because there's only so many in driving distances. And I knew there was going to be something else. And I didn't know what until I got a text the first week of November from my old supervisor that worked for hospice that said, hey, I've got a full-time position open. Are you interested? It's for a bereavement coordinator. And I said, yeah, tell me more. So I've come full circle, and the ending of my hospice work in 2023 was the beginning of my work with you all, and we've gone a couple circles together, and now my end of my time here is also the beginning of my time coming back to hospice in a different role, and in a role that is forward-looking. Because that's the thing about bereavement, is you're rarely even involved with the hospice patient that dies. You're involved after the fact with the family and the loved ones behind, helping them think about how to move forward, helping them to think through what they might want to do differently, where they might be called to live life differently now that they are without their loved one. So I tell you that story just to say, be open. Be open to what God is calling you to, because it might not be what you expect. And even if, like Joseph, you're pretty sure you're doing the right thing, you might be called to do something else. You might be called to pivot, to turn around, to go a different direction, to go somewhere unexpected. So I've watched you all as a church in these past 2 years go unexpected places. We knocked on doors in the neighborhood. We're singing in Spanish. We're having whole festivals and celebrations that are new and different. Stay open. Stay open to where God is calling you as a community. And know that endings are beginnings and beginnings are endings. And listen, just listen for the turn that's completely unexpected that God is asking you to make.